Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 120. It's Friday, and you're sitting down to watch the news. I'm not here. I'm on vacation. This is pre-recorded. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. Today, September 12th, 2014.
George, let's move on to some real news, and we're going to talk about the Episcopal Church, one of our favorite topics, your employer, and we're going to talk about the TREC task force. They put out a report last week that indicated that there needed to be some changes between General Convention, the leadership at 815, and how we run the Episcopal Church. They included in that an important analogy. Well, I thought it was important. They said the Episcopal Church is like Lazarus. Now,
he stinketh.
He stinketh greatly. Now, a lot of people read that and said, oh, yes, we are the risen Lazarus. Nah, sorry.
You're the stinky Lazarus.
You're the one that's stuck in the tomb, dead as a doornail, bound in your grave clothes. And it is what it is. Well, there's some parts of the church that are alive. Yeah, that's just kind of muscle reflexes of a dead church. Don't go thinking too much into it. Now, this TREC task force put together some pretty interesting things about, as far as the business sense of how to restructure the Episcopal Church, George.
Yes. For what they did a great job, and I give them credit for really thinking through these issues. I don't agree with some of their conclusions, but given a mandate of reforming on business principles and more practical lines, the structure and the administration of the Episcopal Church, they did a pretty good job. They want to give more power to the presiding bishop. They want to make the president of the House of Deputies sort of a vice president of the church. They want to make the executive council akin to a board of trustees. They want to get rid of most of the CCABs, the commissions and boards that generate all this paper. And they basically want to weaken and diminish the authority of General Convention. Mm-hmm. Now, individual items I can agree with and disagree with. I don't think the presiding bishop needs any more authority. Thank you very much. I think the current incumbent has shown the dangers of centralization with somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, who's a creature of her attorneys and advisors. But Kevin, we've been down this road before.
We have. I don't know if people can remember back to 2000. We'll call this pre-Gene Robinson. 2000, 2001, 2002, the General Convention called for a 2020 commission, a 2020 strategy group. And this group was to get together and discuss how we can change the Episcopal Church so we're more Gen Y people, more Gen X people, that we can be more attractive to the culture. Wait, they did that. Well, and so that people will fill our pews, and we can double our size by 2020. And now they had a meeting at Camp Allen 1 year before the consecration of Gene Robinson, where everybody was excited. In fact, George, you were at that meeting.
Yes, I wasn't there as a reporter. I was an actual member of the 2020 task force. See, how General Convention created a committee to write a paper, just like they created a committee to prepare the TREC paper. Then General Convention created a task force to implement 2020, and I was on that task force. And we had a fantastic meeting at Camp Allen, and then I sort of looked around the room and listening to these people, and I thought, this is not going to go anywhere. Hey, but it doesn't matter. I'm a young priest. I'm a high flyer. This looks great in my resume. It's just a total waste of time, and I get a free trip to California, to Texas. Yeah. Why do I sound so cynical? Because I very, very quickly encountered the fact that the current power structures in the year 2000 were absolutely unwilling to give up any of their hard-fought authority. The groups over the past generation who had clawed and fought their way into the structures of authority, the hard left, they were not willing to give up anything. And now we have a report that is saying we're going to change the structures, change these committees, change the powers and authorities, and that threatens the movers and shakers of the Episcopal Church. It diminishes, who they are, and it takes away their power and authority. And frankly, I cannot see them willingly going into the good night.
Well, it is interesting because you can't change anything about a church, about people, anything without starting with repentance. And it's just the nature of the beast that we are. If you're not going to start by saying, we blew it, we went off track, and we need to go back on track, well, that starts with repentance. It's not just something willy-nilly. You don't just put a task force together. The first paragraph of every task force about a church of how to start again is to start with repentance. Otherwise, you end up as a continuum of Lazarus, a stinky body in a tomb somewhere.
Well, Kevin, corruption does not always mean that you've got your hand out trying to take envelopes of cash. Corruption can be the accumulation of other things, not property or office or your position. The Episcopal Church's administration in New York is inherently corrupt. Mm-hmm. The culture is one of corruption. And I'll give you straightforward examples. The General Convention of the Episcopal Church meeting in Indianapolis said, move out of Manhattan. Our office building is not serving the needs of the church. It's expensive real estate. Move to St. Louis, move to Peoria, move someplace that is central in the country, that is less expensive and is more reasonable cost-wise. And this was a very strong statement. It was a direction to the national church offices in New York, and they ignored it. Mm-hmm. Or take another instance, a much smaller instance. The Anglican Consultative Council's budget was set. And in the first 2 years, the Episcopal Church's national offices spent all 3 years of allocation. And then Catherine Jefferts Schori says, well, let's just give them more money. Well, it wasn't allocated by the National Church's General Convention. The budget meant nothing. By a stroke of a pen and the rubber stamp of the Executive Council, she bought more power with the ACC, another corrupt organization.
Extremely corrupt.
Now, I could go on and I could go on and I could go on, but my point is that the power structures that are, unless there is true repentance and change of heart, these people are not willing to give up what they have fought to achieve. I mean, why else would we have the millions of dollars spent by the national church in lawsuits, and not a penny of any recovery will go to the national church, by the way? Millions of dollars that are spent by the national church that enrich one law firm in Washington at the expense of all of us, lots of people. Yeah. Why would they follow this policy other than to maintain power and authority? It's not rational, doesn't make business sense. Well, and if they're unwilling to compromise on something like this, I don't think they're willing to compromise on anything.
Well, and the Episcopal Church's interest in power is amazing because you think for the control of the Anglican Communion, you have three entities trying to control it. You have the old Lambeth, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Instruments of Unity trying to control it. That's done with. You have GAFCON trying to have a place in the Anglican Communion. And then you have the Episcopal Church, which now thinks of itself as international. It doesn't think of itself as the American Church or the Episcopal Church with a small e.
Kevin, you're absolutely right, but I want to clarify a tiny bit.
Sure.
It's the people in New York who have this fantastical vision of the Episcopal Church being an Episcopal communion. Mm-hmm. Starting about 2006, maybe in 2009, they started putting up flags in back of the dais at General Convention of all the countries where there are Episcopal churches, 20-odd some places, Taiwan, this, that, and the other place. Before that, there was no sense of our being an Episcopal communion. We had churches in Taiwan, in European places because of either American colonialism, American foreign policy, or American tourists. Mm-hmm. And this has been a conceit of the current administration that we are the, capital T, the Episcopal Church. Never before have we used a capital T, for instance. Never before have we played this fantastical game of flags and claiming that we're a church of this and that and the other countries. The formal legal name is the Protestant Episcopal Church in the United States of America. Heresy. I'm saying something that is contrary. Maybe I'll get a letter from the presiding bishop's office. And, the current presiding bishop is not a very well-educated person. Yes, she has a PhD in oceanography and knows far more than I will ever begin to know about squids. But she has no knowledge of theology, of history, and the people she surrounds herself with have even less, and they're out there. And in the case of her attorneys, I believe they're out there to enrich themselves.
So if you're the average Episcopalian, you wake up and you wonder why your church attendance is so low, it's because you still smell like a dead body. And if you want to change it, the only way that Lazarus came out of the tomb is he heard the verbal call of Jesus.
Kevin, again, I'm going to pick a tiny little bone with you.
No. Yes.
Not all Episcopal churches stinketh.
Stinketh.
Every place where Christ is preached and where Jesus is proclaimed God and where the gospel is placed front and center, whether it's a Baptist church across the street or an Episcopal church in Lecanto, Florida, Christ is present, good things happen, and the good news is proclaimed. The brand Episcopal, as you rightly point out, does not attract customers. But Jesus Christ certainly changes hearts and lives for people who worship.